fly away with me. Don't you be afraid, everything will change. You and I jumping off the edge. They say dreamers never die, so come and fly, come and fly, come and fly away with me. We're rising, we're falling, we're making through. We're climbing, we're soaring, 1,000 views. Somewhere by the emerald sea, where the moon and water meet. Somewhere close to harmony, when the world is sound asleep. Something's gonna bring the change, journeys we are meant to take. Something at the edge of space, calling us to fly away. Don't you be afraid, everything will change. You and I jumping off the edge. They say dreamers never die, so come and fly, come and fly, come and fly away with me. We're rising, we're falling, we're making through. We're climbing, we're soaring, 1,000 views. Something's gonna bring the change, journeys we are meant to take. Something at the edge of space, calling us to fly away.
Michael, unmute yourself. We're going live right now.
Heyo.
Coming
Alright,
to you live from the very well prepared studio in 3 separate houses is Mobtown Live.
Michael, unmute yourself. We're going live right now. Hello, everybody.
Hi, folks.
Welcome to Mobtown Live. Are we doing the theme song?
Oh yeah, we should do the theme song.
Sweet.
Back to the theme song.
Oh, bye everyone.
Welcome. Here we go.
I want to whisper in your ear and tell you that I'm here and take you out to dance and maybe find romance. But you can't, so it's my uptown life. I want to see the friends I miss, or give my mom a kiss, or get my hair cut right, or just sleep through the night. But you can't, so it's Mobtown Live. Mobtown Live, we'll drink with you forever. Mobtown Live, dark and stormy weather. Mobtown Live, what else is there to do but pandemic together?
right, everybody, welcome to Mobtown Live, officially. Once again, my name is Sarah.
I'm Michael.
And this week is going to be slightly different because Mom's out of town, meaning Abby Becker, who you just saw performing the theme song, is not actually here. She's on vacation. And her job is quality control, so we're running wild and free today. We have a lot of really exciting things coming up. Baynard Woods is about to be on the show, which is awesome. A couple notes. One, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Now that we're trying to go back to the YouTube thing instead of Facebook, you should make sure that you get notifications or whatever. We are also trying this new thing where we have a suggested cover of $10 each week. This week is our sort of half-in week. We're still going to put up the payment info for the musical guest, but in upcoming weeks, we are going to pay the musical guest based on one lump sum instead of having you Venmo them specifically. That way we can keep a little better track about how we're treating the people who come on the show and can allocate the money a little bit better. We'll be as transparent as we can about all that. But the Venmo is at Mobtown-Live.
And hundreds of you people watch this thing every week. Often not while it's live, maybe while you're eating cereal in the morning. You're still on the hook. Port artists. Yeah. All of you talk a big game. Now's your chance.
Michael, are you watching the show on your computer? And if so, can you mute it? Oh, I don't know. Where's it coming from? Anyway, doesn't matter. Last thing. Next week, we are going to have a couple of guests. The first one is Aaron Gordon. He's the senior staff writer for The Motherboard, which is Vice's tech and science publication. And he's going to be coming on to talk a little bit about what he does, what he's doing around the post office right now, and also a little bit about journalistic integrity in the wake of Me Too and believing women while also corroborating stories. He's a really exceptional journalist. And then we also are going to have incredible local musician, Zadia, who you should all look up, Zadia. And that's going to be very exciting. So that's next week on the show. Make sure to like and subscribe so that you don't miss it. Up next, to start the show, we are going to talk with Baynard Woods. Michael, why don't you tell us who Baynard is?
Baynard Woods is a writer, a journalist, famously worked for the city paper. My path has crossed his, I think, a number of times in life. We'll get into that. We'll get into it. But him and Brandon Soderberg just wrote I Got a Monster. Well, presumably they wrote it for a long time, but it's out. And I read it. I finished reading it today. We are pumped to talk about it. It is about the gun trace task force of incredibly corrupt Baltimore fame. A horrifying incident in history in general, but particularly in Baltimore's, and it goes through the entirety of the ordeal, including up through the trial and evictions or plea bargains of the characters in the task force. And we're going to dig into it. Is Baynard Woods here? Do we have him?
I think they
Baynard.
are.
Yes.
Oh, hi. I think that you might have turned off your camera.
Oh,
I was trying to turn it on.
There we
and
go.
Said y'all had me blocked. So
Okay, now it's on.
Yeah.
We see you. Welcome.
Great.
So to start off, will you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, how you ended up writing a book on this subject?
Sure. So I'm a writer here in Baltimore. I worked for the city paper for a number of years, also for Urbanite magazine, then for the city paper. And it's amazing to think how many fewer publications we have here now than we had a decade ago, which means how many fewer people are out uncovering stories like this. Back at city paper, shortly after we hired Brandon Soderberg, who wrote a lot about rap, this story came up that one of the cops who's in this book, Daniel Herschel, was targeting the rapper Young Moose, was using his videos and lyrics to get probable cause to both violate his probation and to get search warrants. So we wrote, and we got a tip on that from D. Watkins. We wrote about that. And then in March 2017, I'd been covering the Trump administration at that point. Had been covering police for The Guardian after city paper for, and courts, particularly in Baltimore, covered the Freddie Gray trials and stuff. And then there was this moment in March 1st, 2017, they were indicted. We see, oh, Hearstle's on this. We should start looking into it. And then you realize that he's kind of not to minimize what he did, but that there was just so much more than these First Amendment violations that we saw. And covering those trials, we were like, this needs to be a book. And so we simultaneously, a dirt bike's out my window. So we simultaneously made a documentary and wrote this book. And so we did a lot of interviews on camera as well as, and that was supposed to be in the Maryland Film Fest this year, but coronavirus and such. So hopefully people will get to see that soon.
That's awesome.
For everybody who may not have read the book, or for people who are somehow not familiar with the Gun Trace Task Force, can you give us sort of like a rundown of what happened in the most bare bones way?
Yeah. So 7 cops were indicted on March 1st, 2017 by the U.S. Attorney's Office, federal indictments on RICO charges, the kind of charges that are usually used to, that were invented to bust mobsters. And the charges were wide ranging from overtime fraud, fast overtime fraud, to robbing people, Baltimore citizens, stealing drugs, breaking into houses, robbing from those houses, falsifying video evidence. So there were just a wide range of this criminal conspiracy that went back. The earliest cases we know now that people have been charged and pleaded guilty to go back to 2009. So, had been going on for some time. We think it was going on before that. And one of the tricks is people say, oh, the Gun Trace Task Force, and they want to follow that squad. But the real issue is plainclothes police officers in Baltimore. They for decades, and they change the acronyms all the time: VSIS, VSIT, SES, SET. Every time there's a scandal, you change the acronyms, keep the same people.
Can you explain what that is for people who might not be familiar?
Yeah, so plainclothes policing is also called proactive policing, and they are also called elite squads. And they're usually, they're the kind of cops that they're not the ones who come when you call for a problem, and they're not the ones who are trying to solve homicides or things like that. They're the ones whose sole job is to go out and look for trouble. They used to be the frontline soldiers of the war on drugs. We've now switched. One of the things that we see in the book is that as the drug war started ramping down, we moved it, especially post Freddie Gray, into a war on guns. So white people then were still willing to let them unconstitutionally stop black people all over the city anytime they wanted, because now the justification wasn't the deadly crack, but it was the deadly guns. And so we still allowed them to violate the Fourth Amendment regularly. And they really had a warlike footing. They took that terminology legally. And so they're the jump out boys, the knockers, all of these kind of phrases. And what happened here is the jump out boys become stick up boys. That's sort of the trajectory. And that we believe is an outgrowth of the way that policing works and not just bad apples,
So the book is dedicated to defense attorneys who are standing up for Fourth Amendment rights. And that was, I think, one of the more interesting things to me that might be not intuitive for everybody is why the Fourth Amendment in this context is so important, because the book details a number of situations where somebody who was clearly dealing drugs, right, and therefore not traditionally sympathetic, had their Fourth Amendment rights violated and were conditioned via television, et cetera, to feel like, oh, well, any stick is good enough to beat them if you know that they're up to no good. Ivan Bates in the book seemed to be sort of like the way that he was framed really illustrated why it's so important that Fourth Amendment rights be upheld no matter what all of the time. Can you sort of speak to that journey of understanding that in the book?
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad you asked about it. I think we need more Fourth Amendment absolutists. We have people really fighting for the first and really fighting for the second, but like the Fourth Amendment that prohibits search and seizure without probable cause we've just gotten rid of it over the course of a generation, with the drug war. The kind of no-knock raid that led to the death of Breonna Taylor, like that would have been unthinkable to, not that I'm some originalist or something with the Constitution, but that would have been unthinkable. And that was the kind of situations that the Constitution is supposed to protect is people who may not be doing everything legal, but you don't have the right to kick their door in whether they are or not. And so that's why like that idea of like the perfect victim, the totally innocent victim, we really wanted to push against that kind of stereotype. And yeah, the first case the book opens with is a guy who they found 10 kilos on him, cocaine, a bunch of money, a bunch of guns. They turn in 8 of the kilos, steal 2, and steal over $100,000 from him. They sell the kilos, they split up the money. And, this guy ends up testifying in the trial against him. So it takes it through the whole thing. Ivan Bates becomes his lawyer. And it's a crazy moment in the book because Wayne Jenkins, the head of the gun trace task force, after he would do these robberies like that, he became obsessed. Police can listen to the calls you make from jail in case you say anything inculpatory that will show your guilt. And they often do find people saying things about their guilt. So he found out that he was hiring Ivan Bates as a lawyer. Bates had been on to him since 2010, kind of had this MO of the sneak and peek. What happened was they found this guy on the street. They found drugs and money in the car. So they took his license and his keys. First, he actually sent his bail bondsman collaborator to try to break into the house while he stalled his squad so they could steal all the drugs and money, and he wouldn't have to turn any of it in. But the bail bondsman was worried, didn't want to get shot. That didn't happen. Brings the squad over. They steal the money and the drugs. And he's worried that Bates knows about this. He's worried that the guy, Ori Stevenson, is talking about it. And so he concocts this scheme where he writes a letter to the guy's wife who's paying Bates as a lawyer and says that it's from another woman and that she's pregnant with his child, and puts it on the door to try to keep her from paying the lawyer, and runs off. So the levels of double and triple cross and scheming are just crazy, but it's all begins with these real Fourth Amendment violations. They stopped with no reason, and he had all of these lists of reasons to stop people. They would make up, seatbelt, window tints, but it was a black man with a backpack, certain kinds of cars, all of these reasons. And they would make as many as 50 unconstitutional stops a night called a door pop. And the other thing we really wanted to do was we wanted to write it like a thriller. And usually in the thriller, they're very, in true crime and stuff in general, will be very reinforced law enforcement stereotypes. I mean, you mentioned we've all learned from TV that the Fourth Amendment is garbage. Essentially, like these cops were raised on that as well, that good cops break rules to get bad guys, and they grew up on that, and they crash cars and all these things. And so they're doing these things and they're getting praised for it. And as long as they're getting the guns, they don't ask about probable cause. They don't, and so many of the cases will even get dismissed. Other ones will be, the state's attorney's office was complicit as well in prosecuting them. So defense attorneys would seem to be the only one that were really standing up against these kinds of abuses of the Fourth Amendment that happen daily in Baltimore. And so we wanted one of them to be the investigator that pieced together the crimes like you would normally have a law enforcement person doing. And Bates is both going back to 2010, this one case followed us all the way through. And then he just had a series of cases through the summer. So he was, we don't want it to be that these cops were, although they were in some ways exceptionally bad, our exceptions are that Bates was an exceptionally great lawyer, even though in many ways he is, but it was that he was standing in for what defense attorneys do in a lot of ways, and they were standing in for what dirty cops do in a lot of ways.
Yeah. You mentioned the style and wanting to write it like a thriller. Can you tell us a little bit about, I guess, why you decided to approach the book that way, and then sort of from like a journalistic integrity perspective, how you balanced the storytelling with the facts?
Oh yeah, great question. So I hate the tendency that people think that the more important a subject, the more boring the writing gets to be. This is investigative journalism. And so it's like no scenes. And we both really like to write in scenes, and we wanted it to move. And so the way that worked for us was, and we wanted to kind of try to invent something that would be, not invent because it's going back to Ida B. Wells and people, but we wanted to really embody something that was like an anti-racist, anti-fascist thriller, and put that kind of element into it. And so that helped us so much with dealing with the facts that we had, because one of the problems was too much stuff. Wiretaps, tons of court documents, text messages, 1 million characters already. Like that's the
It starts
biggest
with a cast of characters.
Yeah, it's the biggest and most accurate complaint is definitely that it's like Russian fucking novel kind of characters. And so we hoped to keep people straight, but it really was, it was something we worried about. And so only the plot went forward by only with the things that we had enough facts to make a scene. So if we could put enough pieces together to really make it feel like you're there, then that kind of became part of the main plot. And if we didn't, we had it through a flashback or communicated through the envelope of some other scene, someone telling someone else or whatever. So it really helped us narrow down. And then that was also one of the reasons we focused more on Bates, was because the cases he had, I mean, there were so many more cases. If you've read the book, just hundreds more that we couldn't do, but we wanted there to be a through line and wanted it to feel like, and that also is what helped us. Having a plot helped us narrow, decide which cases, because it gets kind of tedious. They robbed another person and they did the same MO, and they robbed another person. And there were some really compelling and important things we cut out. They down by Raven Stadium, they robbed a homeless guy. So, it wasn't just these huge drug dealers they thought were monsters, but they would also then rob homeless people and stuff. And so, we had to leave a lot out for that, but we really wanted people to read it. We wanted it to be something, and that's been kind of the best compliments we've had, has been people saying, I couldn't put it down. I read it in a sitting. I read it in a couple of days. And,
it's a quick read.
Yeah, and it wraps you in real quick.
Thanks.
One of the things that I sort of experienced while reading it was a reaffirmation of how undaring they had to be to get people to be corrupt. Like there's a couple people who are clearly uncomfortable with what they're witnessing or being asked to participate in, but it didn't seem like at any point they thought that they should sort of rat on this. Mostly they wanted to avoid it or get transferred. Even as I was reading, I felt the sense of like, these guys are bad, but when are the good cops going to show up? And I know better than that. Was there anybody who was sort of a moral police officer in this tale, or was it just people kind of hiding at best?
I mean, there is a way to tell the story that has been told before that we really wanted to avoid. That is, Black Baltimore cop working with Black Baltimore drug dealers gets busted by Harford County sheriff's officers on their white horses who come in trying to tackle the opioid epidemic. There's another version that the U.S. attorneys and the FBI were, but we were really suspicious of those for the obvious lessons of the story, that we were really suspicious of a lot of those narratives. And some things about the U.S. attorney's way the case comes together don't really make sense, particularly involving, so one of the officers in GTTF was not indicted. Only one wasn't, John Kluel. And so he's kind of been presented as a Boy Scout and all these other things. And he probably, it seems like he wasn't robbing with them, but he did loan them GPS trackers that he paid for with his own money to use to illegally track suspects. And so even the people that were deemed Boy Scouts and stuff were violating Fourth Amendment rights regularly. They just maybe weren't stealing money. There, a few years back, people might remember there was the case in Baltimore of Joe Crystal. He was a cop here who his squad was chasing a guy who seemed to be dealing drugs through the streets, I think, of East Baltimore. The guy kicks in a door to get away. They catch him in there. They put him in the van, take him away. They find out that house is the house of the girlfriend of another cop. So they call him back. They bring him in the place and they kick his ass. And Joe reported it to the state's attorney's office. There were dead rats put under his windshield after that at his house. He would call for backup and no one would come for the backup. And he wasn't able to, he had to leave ultimately because his life seemed to be in danger. And so there had been just a couple of years earlier, that message being clearly sent out about what happens if you talk. There was a guy, Kostopoulos, who they took him out and they're like, hey, what do you think about going and robbing some drug dealers? And he's like, that's a fucking terrible idea, were his exact words. So then they just transferred him out of the squad. And then there was, and he thought it was a moral test of him rather than a real proposal. And then there's a guy that's questionable that the Sun has reported on, Ryan Gwynn, who was with them when they chased, back in 2010, they chased a guy that they thought was a drug dealer, Umar Burley. That caused a car crash that killed a man named Delbert Davis. They planted an ounce of heroin on Burley because he had nothing on him. Burley and the guy in the passenger seat did a bunch of time on that, both for manslaughter and for the heroin. It turned out that was planted. The two people in the car with Wayne Jenkins that day were Sean Suter, who later was either murdered or committed suicide right before the trials began and the day before he was going to testify against them, and Ryan Gwynn, who the Sun has reported was a sort of whistleblower that knew about some of the corruption that Mamadou Gondo and Jamel Rayam, two different guys in the squad, were involved in. But he seemingly didn't know it about Jenkins. So good, there wasn't a lot of cops now will say, oh, I had my doubts about them. But yeah, there weren't people saying like, this dude's bad.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. So like, when I'm talking to people who live, say, outside of Baltimore in different states, maybe in suburbia or rural areas where the police force is something very, very different.
Saving kittens from trees.
Right, exactly. Or like driving your kid home when they got caught drinking, but not arresting them, that sort of thing. And, I feel like the conversations around police reform or abolition become circular because half of us are having a conversation about the individual morality of specific people, and half of us are having a conversation about the system. And I was really struck in the beginning of the book when, I forget which one it was, when he didn't want to take the money, but knew that if he didn't take the money, Jenkins was going to destroy him in some way. And so he tossed it so that because his wife would find out if he brought it home. And it just, to me, seemed like a sort of apt image of why the system feeds into this and how specific officers can really dictate everything. And I'm curious how you approach those conversations with all the knowledge that you have, how you talk about police abolition or reform and the system versus individuals.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, one of the things that we feel like the book really can offer right now is we went through the book starts really, the prologue is with the uprising after the death of Freddie Gray. And very much of this ramping up, this crime spree that they went on was in effect a counterinsurgency against the protest movement and against the Obama era reforms. And we wrote a story in the Washington Post arguing that there was a really concerted effort to undermine every one of those kinds of reforms. And so in a lot of ways, the Gun Trace Task Force, rather than being this anomaly, is the perfect argument for the abolition or defund movement, because it shows that the mechanisms of body cameras and, they faked footage. There's footage, they left their body camera on and they broke into a person's house. And when the lawyer's saying, hey, they broke into my client's house, neither the prosecutor nor the judge care. And so you see the weaknesses of all of those Obama era reforms. And in fact, what you see is that they created crime. They were, what the sociologists and stuff call criminogenic, that they produce crime rather than decrease crime. So every time every time they did a door pop, so anytime there was a group of black men standing around, they'd speed up in their car, slam on the brake, pop open the door. If anyone ran, they would then chase them, tackle them. They had one technique called radio head, where you'd throw a radio at their head if they were running and seemed too far. You would then, if you heard them, you would then film them saying, oh, I fell and I was running because of this reason, I wasn't hurt. And then if they had drugs, you would just take their drugs. And then it turned out they would go off and sell those. So every time that happened, someone was robbed for $100,000, $200,000, all this weed or cocaine, all of that created major problems for those people, major disruptions. And imagine what happens if you lose $100,000 in your life. You know, it's and so like one guy, Davon Robinson, is one case that we know they stole $10,000 from him and also arrested him. So he went to trial. Coming back from trial, people that he'd been hiding out at his grandmother's house, and people that he owed a drug debt to followed him from, or not trial, but a hearing, followed him from court at the hearing and shot him in front of his daughter when he got back home over a debt that he wasn't able to pay because he'd had his money stolen. And so when you look at how much crime that produces, and then you see these cops saying, hey, well, that just means more overtime for us. You know, there's been this weird discussion about slowdowns or what causes the crime spike. Alec McGillis wrote a piece, who lives here, wrote a piece for ProPublica on the Atlantic. And it's just a ridiculous argument because it presumes that the only thing that keeps us all from killing each other is the knee of police on our shoulders. And the minute that they let up, we're all going to just shoot each other. But that they are these moral entities and exempt from human nature. And so what we found actually was the case is there were the kind of officers who were responding, if you call or I call, who were responding were slowing down, weren't making as many stops or weren't responding as quickly, but that the plainclothes guys had ramped up, especially when Commissioner Kevin Davis came in, and they were being rewarded. They were getting a gun or multiple guns a night by doing these door pops and stuff. And so but they weren't arresting people for drugs because they were stealing the drugs. So that creates all of these different levels of chaos that create crime, that create the conditions that they can all say, hey, you better not defund police because look, it's going to be chaos, when they're actually the ones who are like contributing to a great amount of chaos.
Mm.
It's wild. I do, like, for those of you watching, you should read this book. It's almost impossible to believe, like, any one of the anecdotes would seem like hideous and newsworthy, but the fact that there were so many piled on top of each other, and it was, you know, when you're sitting there reading it and you go, like, the people who are being harassed by these cops are the ones also paying for them to exist in this like psychotic system. It's haunting. Well, I had this is maybe more of a personal question. Well, not personal question, but one that interests me, and I don't know how people will feel. The book is the first book I've ever read that extensively quotes tweets and text messages, which had to be a weird thing. I was fascinated by the way that the police seemed to adopt the lingo of drug dealing and the streets in a way that was like almost like they were glamorizing the people that they were holding up and sort of aspiring to be like them. Can you speak to like you said when we talked before this that it was Homeric, right? These are basically like pirates running about getting booty. What is facilitating that mindset and the distinction between, you know, there is no distinction, but like criminally, all this behavior is criminal. But why on earth would people who are grown up in this culture of policing make that sort of move?
There's a couple different reasons. One of the things that we liked about this story was that the different cops had different motivations for what they were doing. But the large sort of historical sweep that puts us there, I think, is that, like, if you're a working class person in Baltimore, everything went away and you had a couple different options. And there were the drug war, and you could either be in one side of the drug war or the other. And a lot of people often probably didn't feel ideological commitment to either side. It was a job. So essentially being mercenaries. And that's, I think, Gondo, in fact, probably felt more allegiance to the other side, the criminal side. In fact, he definitely did. His lifelong friend, Kyle Wells, part of the crew that ended up bringing him down, that was selling drugs out of the Alameda Shopping Center. He was protecting them and working with him and had more allegiance to him than he did to the police department. Wayne Jenkins, I think, very early on started his criminal activities as well. And the same things that made him a rewarded decorated cop made him a good criminal. And it really, though, was that war mindset that we use in our language: war on drugs, war on guns. So when you're in a war, you dehumanize the other side. They're mopes or scales or all these different cop slang for people who you're dealing with, but you also have more in common with them than you have with anyone in the straight world. So for years, Jenkins worked primarily at night as a drug cop and then became a gun cop. But, you know, that was who all his time was around street people and drug people and shooters. And he was always cultivating sources in that world. And so it was in his interest to be able to talk with people like that and talk with people in that world. And I think he very much saw himself as his co-conspirator, the bail bondsman, Donnie Stepp, who we talked to a lot. He was very much of the underworld, of the sort of white county underworld, cocaine dealer. But he also had this kind of way of talking that that was just their language, whether you were a cop or that was Jenkins tried to, he would text to black people that he thought were dealing drugs and try to sound like he was black. He also threw the N-word around, you know, and I think more in the like trying to be down way than in the overseer way, but I think it kind of crosses those lines back and forth. And given that he was essentially something like an overseer. And so like, yeah, it's a really complicated, porous thing between those worlds because you don't have much in common with the straight world anymore once you've been doing that for long enough.
This might be a weird question, but the longer that I've lived in Baltimore and the more that I have roots in various different communities in Baltimore and can sort of see things through my friends' eyes, and then having these conversations around police reform and the experiences of policing from different groups of people, I feel like when I go outside, especially in Baltimore City, different people are literally seeing reality in different ways. Like a lot of white people, I think, just are not aware at all of what's going. Like Jump Out Boys could show up and start harassing someone, and half the time, if you're not someone who is prone to being harassed, you're not going to notice what's happening. I'm wondering if you, like, as a journalist and as you have been entrenched in these worlds, do you see the world differently when you go outside? And how would you go about asking somebody else to see it differently?
Yeah, 100%. And that really, I mean, the time that struck me most forcefully was during the uprising after the death of Freddie Gray. Like, being on April 25th, the night where things kind of went off at Camden Yards. After that, I was over right by the Western District Station and by Gilmore Homes at like midnight, and the cops were retaliating for what had happened at Camden Yards that day. And so there were hundreds of cops and maybe 30 to 50 residents, and they would make military formations. And I was with City Paper's staff photographer, Joe Giordano, and they stomped and tackled Joe and the Reuters photographer in order to get this guy and hit him in the head. Joe got the shot as they were dragging him away. But I realized at that moment, especially, how much different policing is in Black Baltimore than it is in white Baltimore, to the point of being apartheid.
No.
Yeah.
One of the things I would ask people would be to consider that our legal system is fundamentally different based upon racial and along with that economic and geographical lines. And that the police really are here to protect white property, as they always have been. And they see that that's protected from Black people. And one of the ways that I've been thinking about it a lot lately is that the logic of policing and the logic of whiteness are the same, that they're both based on the idea that we are protected but not bound by the law, and that other people are bound but not protected. And that is the legal system that I think dominates Baltimore, both in policing, in prosecution, in every aspect of our legal system. And it makes us as white people complicit in that. And so, you know, I think like you see it in the sort of videos of you know, the Cooper video in New York. Like, she was the one who was violating the law, but then it's like, well, I'm not supposed to. You see it in Trump. I'm not supposed to be. I'm going to have a law and order campaign when you're violating the Hatch Act at the White House. You're effectively saying law means that we're going to bind others, but that we will be only protected. And so that sort of, that formulation comes from a guy, Francis Wilhoit, sort of mid-century, almost forgotten bureaucrat, but I found it really powerful to think about that as something that people should think about when they go around. And I mean, spend more time, maybe not in the pandemic. Don't bring your risks other places and try to, in order for you to learn, but hey, get out of the White Owl in Baltimore and really watch what police do. The organizations like Cop Watch and stuff. You would never, when people say, well, how could we have a world without police? If you got rid of jump out boys, of plainclothes cops, it would be exactly like a white neighborhood is what it would be like. You know?
Yeah.
When you're walking to the store in Mount Vernon or Federal Hill or something, you're not made to sit down. You're not made to lift up your scrotum and stuff. And like, this happens regularly to people who aren't white in the city. And so like, if you ask yourself what the world would look like without police, who are, especially without the kind of war-footing police that we write about here. Go to a white neighborhood and you see what it looks like.
There's Mount Vernon.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's I think a very lovely place. Well, not lovely, but a solid place to end the conversation on the book, which everyone should go buy. People, IGotAmonster.com. Is that it?
Yeah, we do have a website made by Brandon, my co-author. And there's a trailer on there with some footage of this stuff you can watch. And I'd encourage, man, don't buy the book from Amazon. If you want to review it there, that's cool. But please buy it from Charm City Books. You know, they're right by Mobtown Ballroom. We went over and signed a bunch there. I think they should still have some signed copies. We've been going to other bookstores in town. If you're closer or want to support another one, all of the local bookstores here. It's been 6 months now since really we haven't been able to do this. So please buy books from local bookstores.
So can I ask you one sort of off the book question about your experience as a journalist before we let you go?
Yeah.
One of the things that we sort of hammered on in this show a bunch is talking about kind of like media hygiene, essentially, like talking to our very internet befuddled friends about how to like maybe pay for your news. And I've witnessed you in the times that I've seen you on the internet when I talk about the importance and the significance of paying for the information you get and supporting these. Can you talk about your take on these issues at all? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, definitely. And I totally, that's exactly right. Like it costs a lot of money to do journalism. And I mean, I mentioned that we did this along with the film, like to write a book, people are like, oh, you're profiting off this. Like, we made less money in the time we wrote this book and journalism pays so badly as it is. When I worked at City Paper, a majority of the staff made around $30,000 a year to be working like 60 to 70 hour weeks, and book advances and things are for the most part very low. So it costs money to produce journalism. One reason that TV media and reporting is so bad is because we have so many fewer outlets that are doing actual reporting places. So we have to rely on pundits to all just sort of spin opinions on the few reported things that do come out. We're all going to talk about Bob Woodward now. We're all going to talk about this now. And it takes money, and it's a weird thing. And normally it would be, I would say, we need to nationalize the media or something, but it's a real problem. You can't have the state controlling media either.
Yeah.
So both having capitalist controlled media is a real problem. Having state controlled media would be a real problem. Nonprofit has some issues but nonprofit I think is a really good way to go. But there's a whole generations now that have never paid for reporting, and it does cost a lot of money, and people are losing their jobs wildly for it. I mean, daily. Right now in Annapolis, they're shutting down the newsroom there and saying, hey, we're not going to have a newsroom anymore.
It's a travesty.
So, yeah, it really is heartbreaking in a lot of ways to see, and we've lost, like I was mentioning at the beginning, Urbanite, City Paper. All of these things are, and that's partly because we're not supporting the media and we're supporting Facebook and things instead. And so lastly on that, I guess, never say, why isn't the media reporting when you post a link from a story that's been reported by the media? The media is reporting. What you should reframe it as, why aren't you, my stupid ass fucking friend, sharing this important story that the media put a lot of money into reporting? You lazy pieces of shit. Buy the media. That's what you should be saying now.
Oh my God. This is wonderful. It's wonderful. All my friends watching, listen to him, right? It's not me saying it, it's him.
I feel like we should have a few more drinks and see where this conversation goes.
Get some shots in him. You lazy pieces of shit.
I'm literally wearing my WYPR shirt right now, so I don't know. Maybe you should give out a free pair of socks with every book.
Oh, I mean, support WYPR. Like, we're not. I'm not trying to hawk books on this, but people have been buying our book kindly. but subscribe to papers and newspapers and that sort of stuff, and not just the New York Times. A lot of people have subscribed to the New York Times and the Washington Post after Trump, and they're very important, but we don't want where there are two big national media publications and then there's TV and there's nothing else left. Like, that's not the way for an ecosystem to work. And it is kind of becoming that way, the winning and losing sort of things. And then they're crushing out others. So think of other independent media that you can support as well. WYPR is a great example. I got a monster. Out of the Blocks. Sorry, I'm so used to plugging this. Out of the Blocks by our friends Wendell Patrick and Aaron Hinken is just one of the best shows in the country that's produced out of there. And it takes a lot of time and money to make that show. So definitely support them as well.
For viewers that might not know about that show, Out of the Blocks takes one city block of the city. And I don't know how long they spend. It's either 10 minutes or an hour or something. I don't know. I've listened to a couple, clearly not enough. But they do a deep dive and they meet with residents. They talk about the history. They talk about their challenges. It's an incredible program, and it really puts voices to real people.
Yeah, they spend months reporting it is the thing, too. Like, they'll show up and show up show up and show up. And then, it'll be an hour, but they break it also into 10 or 5-minute segments to play through the day on YPR is why the length is confusing. But I encourage people to support people who are doing the good kind of, the Baltimore Brew lately has just been
absolutely
breaking so many important stories and just killing it. So
and there's barely any ads on that website at all. I don't know how those people are doing amazing work for hopefully
no ads. In fact, it's all the way they do it is sign up to pay them $5 a month. If you value their reporting, that's the way they do it, and through some grants and things. But we're going to lose all of, and outlets too, where the for live performances and stuff. If we don't support the places that we love, we're going to lose them. Like, that's what this time is showing us. And
we're familiar with that dynamic.
So we it's on us. So if you're listening or watching, buy your news, figure out how to support your venues during this crazy, insane, tough time. Figure out how to support your bookstores, the artists that you support. Clearly the state is putting all its money into BP. The city, the government, by the state, is putting all its money into BPD, $500 million a year per budget. And so the rest is kind of left up to us.
Well, thank you so much, Baynard. This was really great. And I especially appreciated your shout out at the end to all of the shitbags or whatever it was that you sound like us. So
God damn it.
I think everyone's yelling at their screens all the time now. And so, we just kind of brought it into.
Well, everyone go out and buy I Got a Monster and check out all various resources that Baynard just plugged. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. I really loved talking with you. It's been really fun.
Awesome. Well, you have a good one, Baynard. Thank you.
All right, you too. Thanks so much.
That was awesome. So happy.
That's what I say.
What did you say?
He earned my follow on Twitter. I've only followed Brandon, but now I'm gonna have to up that.
So we had planned for me to make a cocktail, but since we're running slightly behind, why don't we skip that or save it till later? and go to our musical guest. What do you all think of that?
Let's make a cocktail afterwards while we're talking about books when people can zone out.
Yeah. So our musical guest tonight is Christy McDonald. Christy has been active in the Baltimore music scene for several years, including rock and metal bands, American and Balkan folk groups, and countless jazz gigs. She's a pretty incredible guitarist. And so she also has a diverse studio of students that she teaches. So all different kinds of music and people pursuing different kinds of things. So here's Christy McDonald. Please make sure to Venmo her at Christy-McDonald1. And here she is.
Huzzah.
to my girls, oh man, I asked them for my true love's hand. Lord, Lord, I got the brown fairy blues. He said, you lie, little Duluth. Instead of her hand, I got his foot. Lord, Lord, I got them Brown's fairy blues. Thanks for having me, Mobtown. Appreciate it. Love me or leave me, even let me be lonely. You won't believe it, but I love you only. I'd rather be lonely than happy with somebody else. Might find the nighttime the right time for kissing. Nighttime is my time for just reminiscing, regretting instead of forgetting with somebody else. There'll be no one unless that someone is you. I intend to be independently blue. I want your love, I don't want to borrow. Have it today to give back tomorrow. Your love is my love, there's no love for nobody else. There'll be no one unless that someone is you. I intend to be independently blue. Oh. I want your love, don't want to borrow. Have it today to give back tomorrow. Your love is my love, there's no love for nobody. Your love is my love, no one for nobody. Love is my love, there's no love for nobody else. Thanks again, appreciate it.
Oh,
Now, hello.
Hello.
Is it time?
Are we back?
We're
I think
back.
We're back. Oh my gosh, and we're back. Good evening, back.
That was awesome. I really like Christy's music. Thank you, Christy. We need to have you play at the ballroom / in a band with me. Because that was some pretty cool jazz.
yeah. We made an error earlier in the Venmo. There's an extra dash before the 1 at the end of Christy's name. Show Christy some love.
Hachi put it up on the screen, so the corrected version was the accurate one that you can find. Please send Christy some money.
Yeah.
Some money.
Some money. All right, it's time. Is it time?
It is, and I'm finishing the scene right now.
Let's explain
It's
the
time
internet.
for Hachi to explain the internet. This is how this works for those of you who have never seen it. Hachi, who is the one running all the tech, knows about the internet, and Michael and I don't. There are certain things we understand. Like, I think we both crushed in the days of forums.
Oh, yeah.
And
I made so many people
She
cry.
said this the other day. Seriously.
I was really good at building people's MySpace pages with HTML, but I haven't done anything since. So Hachi, we pick a topic each week and Hachi explains to us what it is. Most of you will already know what it is. So this week, Hachi, are we ready?
Yeah, I'm just making sure Michael fits. Hold on. I think we're ready. Yeah, cute.
Cool.
Let's do it. Let's just jump right into it.
So tonight you're going to explain to us what 5G is. And I know that you've tried to explain this to me many times in the past. I was wondering if you could maybe start with like what a G is.
Yes, a G is a unit of money, I believe. Is it start at 1 or 1,000?
It's
Okay,
1,000.
this is already going really well.
That was a terrible joke. Yeah.
Yes. A G stands for generation. So
okay.
aren't you feeling old yet that we're getting onto the 5th generation?
Yeah, I guess that's weird. I mean, I remember 3G, but that's really it.
Well, 1G was cell phones, and you could talk to people. If you were rich, you had one in your car, and that's pretty much the only place you had one. We had one in our car. We were white people, rich, upper middle class, and also it helps when your dad works at Radio Shack. Yeah, we had that, and then that was fine. But then people already got tired of talking to one another, and they decided that it would be better to text. So they added a little bit of data into the mix, and that was 2G. And you could check some very basic. You could get your stocks, check the old ticker. And yeah, like that was fine too. But then people decided that they just didn't want to talk to each other at all and just go on the internet. And so they got the 3G. And 3G was pretty fast, I guess. You could primarily only be cool if you had a Motorola Razr. And then 4G is really, really good. And 5G is also a thing.
So it's kind of, the G is kind of just like being like 0.1, 0.2, like.
Yeah, kind of like
it's just
that.
It sums up more of a branding thing.
It sums up a lot of very broad technologies that put the whole thing together. It's like an evolutionary step.
I see. Okay, well, I'll let you explain and interrupt you with questions as you go instead of tackling it from my arcane perspective.
Today we will answer the real question. Is 5G good?
Oh.
It doesn't cause coronavirus, or does it?
Is it controlling my mind?
That is what we will hazard to find out at the end of this. This guy, you've heard a lot of things about him. Is he or isn't he trying to get into your brain through millimeter wave technology? Who can say? Does he have the means? Absolutely. Would he do it for the lulz? Probably.
Oh.
They say that 5G poses no health risks to you. But as you can see, the 5G waves were strong enough to push the sign onto this little toddler's head. So on the right, we have the traditional cell phone tower, far away from you, only putting its hazardous electromagnetic waves into farmers or people that live on the outskirts of town. And now we have this new thing over here, these microcells. They're popping up all over town. That's not the right tab.
I see.
This is the right town.
This is an issue.
This is Baltimore.
This whining about it, is it because they're like, I was fine with those bad things, the whatever electric stuff, when it was just hurting people out in rural areas, but now that it's near me, I don't like it. Is that what they're saying?
If a cell phone tower falls in the woods, so you've got your NIMBYs, and then you've got your unknown NIMBYs. They didn't even know what cell phones were. Everyone's like, how's this fucking cell phone thing work? It uses satellites, right? It uses the GPS. No, that is not how that works at all. Well, kind of. But so instead of your classic towers, everybody loves these towers. Not those. Those are all new. These old guys. Actually, all of these are new. I shouldn't have just searched 5G tower. But instead of them being far away and very strong, they're less strong and literally everywhere. In before, if they can be everywhere, why is our internet so expensive? Yes, that's a very good question. But yeah, they're like everywhere. Oh, also in before, if they can be everywhere, why are our traffic lights so fucking old and out of sync? Makes you think. It's all a conspiracy. I don't know what this one's a picture of. Maybe the light poster coronavirus. 5G towers. I don't know. But yeah.
Wait, so
You said yeah, like we arrived somewhere together, and I don't think that we did. I am now more confused than I was before, and I find the internet horrifying.
Can I try to give I really want to have a visual on this. So the internet.
I think I have a visual.
Is
the
these
internet.
tubes that go like things that go across the ocean or whatever. And then also there's these satellites, and then there are these big dishes on like either side of the country, right? That kind of talk to the satellites. I think.
Yeah. Yep. So we've got the LL Bean registered internet tube.
But then, so when there's cell phones, they have the towers that go down to the cell phones in like to
the underwater cell phones.
Oh, Jesus. Well, then, so what is the technology of 5G? It's just the same, but like up close?
It's all just Chinese magic. So recently the government has been trying to stop all 5G because clearly only China has all of the patents on 5G. That's not true, but they are trying to stop China because China cannot be trusted. What was the question? How does it work?
Yeah. Just to be clear, while we have this brief pause, none of us actually think that 5G or 4G or any of them are causing health issues.
Don't tell me what to think.
Or otherwise. Well, okay. But people are like commenting in the comment section being like, actually, it doesn't. We know that we're making fun of people / to me, the argument of 5G hurts your health, if it was based on the idea that 4G hurts other people's health and now's the time when you're upset, that makes me mad, even though I know that it's not helping anyone.
I actually looked it up because after everyone started complaining about it, I did unknown NIMBY myself, and I started Googling it because, it will hurt you if you like climb the tower. This is the old towers, not the new towers. If you like climb a tower and you like hold yourself in front of it, like that will hurt you a lot. So it's all about like sustained being around it. So I think that the people where they're being put outside of their house with probably not being informed ahead of time do have a reasonable argument that they should have been informed.
Fair.
And so far, my
dum-dums.
15 seconds of Googling about that and then not thinking about it again. I don't have anywhere to go with that.
Well, but yeah, cell phones too. Like you're not supposed to like have them attached to your head at all times, right?
Yeah, or near your testicles. Not a good idea.
Right, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But you asked like how do they work? I don't know. They somehow magically produce these invisible light waves, and then they connect to your phone. But there's just a bunch of different companies that are installing them. The ones that are getting installed in the city, I don't know. A guy's installing them for a company, maybe many companies. Who built that equipment? I don't know, some person, and then who put the stuff in that makes that stuff work? I don't know, someone else.
Can any company use the 5G hardware that's being put around the city, or is the hardware, does it have to be put up by different companies every time they want to do it?
Back in the day, most of the towers were individual towers. Like the 1 through 4G towers were all owned individually. I actually really don't understand how 5G works, and I've had T-Mobile for the last like 6 years, so I have incredible service in almost everywhere. So I pretty much care nothing about 5G, but I know everything about it for the purposes of illustrations. It is very hard to trust me.
In here.
I was like, let's get back to more things I don't understand about. Okay, so we talked about tubes. We talked about the difference. Everyone now knows the difference. Yeah. Seen these around the city?
Huh.
This person probably knows what they are talking about because they know enough to use double-sided tape. Look at that.
Wait, so this, I just want to be clear, you're being sarcastic with that one, right? Or
which one?
Are you, the picture you just showed, do you think that warning is legitimate?
I did not read it, but I saw that it had a scary looking warning on it.
Okay.
So I put it on the screen.
Classic.
Oh, okay.
Wake up, sheeple.
I was looking for one like this earlier. It was clearly on this page. I didn't see it. Yeah, see what? This is actually the best one I've seen so far. That's kind of the missing link that we've been looking for a while. The vaccine-based 5G chemtrail beam. Yes. Okay. I'm not suggesting that you do what they did back in Europe years ago. But if you wanted to, all you have to do is put a tire on top of it, fill it with lighter fluid, and it'll just go.
Yeah, that works for destroying most things, I think.
Good thought. I also had this picture of the Chinese seeds up here. I was trying to work that into the presentation.
Oh yeah, people been getting those in the mail.
Yeah. Oh, maybe that's what happens when you plant them. They become 5G towers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I highlight a comment. Abby, who isn't here but is watching adorably, said, "Remember when Kenneth lost his cell phone and it was in the freezer? How many G's is that?" So one of our dear friends, about 10 years ago, lost his cell phone and couldn't find it, and he is one of those people who loses things a lot, like just constantly. And eventually we found it in the freezer.
See, the tough thing with that is technology likes being cold, except for batteries. They like being warm, but not hot.
I mean, Hachi, I don't think there's any reasonable way to think that it should have been in the freezer.
Well, sometimes, for a little while.
just a little cooling back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you understand that, right?
I mean, I'm not sure what there is to understand, but yes.
Michael looks like he understands.
I've been screenshotting this over and over again, just with Michael's exasperation and frustration.
We're recording this whole thing too.
Yeah, but I figured this would be a good promo for Hachi Explains, just Michael being like, oh.
It's reactions. The internet's really into reactions.
Oh yeah, those are the thumbnails.
Michael, why don't you...
Here's the thumbnail.
Michael, why don't you repeat it back to us so we know that you understand?
5G is a bunch of bats from Wuhan with electrodes in their brains flying across America, shooting the internet and YouTube into your house.
Yes. That's the only thing I will correct you on is the bat is made out of light.
Cool.
Wuhan.
Wuhan?
Those Iraqis coming into our American soil with the Wuhans. Yeah.
This is some top-notch programming.
Okay, well,
I feel bad for people that want the 5G though. Like I can download the internet on my phone is faster than the internet in my fucking house. Like I went camping with Rachel a couple months back, and I had faster internet in the middle of Green Ridge State Park than I did in Baltimore. So I don't know what this 5G nonsense is, but it's really complicated, and I do not yet have the mental faculties to fully understand it. So that's Hachi Explains. Sorry, that's White Man Explains Things to audience that he doesn't actually know anything about.
This has been our whitest show today.
It is our whitest show.
Yeah, it's our whitest show, everyone. Congratulations.
Just so we needed more of that in the world.
Anyway,
thank you so much. Thanks, Hachi. I really appreciated that explanation of 5G. At least you really cleared up the G part. I thought it meant something that I didn't understand. Like Abby commented, she thought it meant gigabytes. Which the idea that she thought 5 gigabytes were being used to make something magical is hilarious. But anyway, Michael, I think we should hand it, or sorry, Hachi, you're done, yeah?
I'm so done. Oh, I meant to hit this button.
Cool. Thanks. All right, Michael, I think it's time to hand it off to you for whatever taste-making expedition you're about to go on to wrap up the show.
So we're doing Sage on Stage. We might return to that, but
Sage on Sage.
it also sounds like the weirdest porn site ever.
It's Sage and Sage.
Oh, Sage on, not Sage on Sage.
It's Sage all the way down, people.
You get to see Derrida and Sartre go at it.
Sage in Sage. Anyway, you like that?
Yes,
So-
I think we all got it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you did. Well, now it's just for today. It's just taste making because there's something that I gotta be in my bonnet about, and I want to
it's
share
just
it
taste making. Okay,
with the world, right? And that is this: Hilary Mantel. Okay, she'd been the darling of certain literary circles for a while, due to a trilogy that she just completed. There goes my thing. About Thomas Cromwell, who was a advisor and a sort of significant potentate to Henry VIII, the Henry VIII that had many wives and beheaded one of them and was just sort of a raucous kind of guy. Hilary Mantel is an English author, and she's extraordinary. I'm gonna wave these by you, okay? There's over 2,000 pages in this shit. First one's called Wolf Hall. Boom, Wolf Hall. Okay. The next one, Bring Up the Bodies. The final one, which I finished the other day, is The Mirror and the Light. And here's what's interesting about this shit. One, it is justly being praised all over the place. Two, she chooses Cromwell as the main character through the lens through which to view the era of Henry VIII. And he's not a likable character historically, and not really in her books either. And it turns into a fascinating dive into sort of through, written by a woman, damaged men and toxic masculinity, but without the fucking preachiness you get on the internet. Like you actually learn something instead of hating the person who's telling it to you, right? That's what we have going on. I prepared a little presentation to sort of get into this subject some. So get ready. Here we go. Oh, I got a screen share.
I'm ready. I'm ready for whatever you got.
Michael, remember to make it fill your whole screen.
You can tell me if I'm doing it right. Boom. How's
Nope,
that?
not
right,
yet.
now press play.
I gotta press
Michael
play.
asked us
Yeah, press play.
what the PowerPoint thing is that we were talking about last week was on Max.
Boom.
Oh, Michael. Yeah.
Hey-o.
Good job.
All right.
And
So-
we told him it was called Keynote. You're welcome.
I want you to take this picture in because it's a testament to the British people. I spent some time in England, and I can verify this. That they don't. They take one picture of you, and then they just use that one. They don't have time for tries. This is Hilary Mantel wearing what I can only assume is some kind of American outfit, and there she is looking right at you. All right, incredible author. She wrote a bunch of books before this trilogy. I haven't read any of them, so don't ask me about that shit. Next, all right. A prominent character in this trilogy is
Did you
Hans
mean to
Holbein.
advance your own slide by saying next?
Not yet.
Okay.
I'm going to show you a series of paintings. Number one, that's Henry VIII, supposedly. It
Boom.
was painted by Hans Holbein, who's a famous guy who painted everyone from the era. And look at how flattering this is. Henry VIII, in his later days, was a kind of a monster. He had a suppurating, oozing leg wound from a hunting accident that just never healed. And he's also a murderer of his wife, and a lot of people actually. Okay, so this is how he was depicted gloriously by Hans. This is all of Henry VIII's wives. It's too bad.
Huh. They all look pretty similar. Is that because they did look similar, or because this painter wasn't very he had one thing going on?
I think Henry VIII just had a
I believe it's
type.
a different painter. But I have no idea, having not met Henry VIII's wives.
Yeah, he had a type, I guess. Hachi's right. That's, yeah.
This is Sir Thomas More, who is an important character in this period in history, famously known through the play and movie A Man for All Seasons, where he stands up nobly against the king's requirement that he, express fealty towards Henry separating from the Catholic Church so he can get divorced, and it's a whole thing. This is how Hans Holbein depicted him. This is how Hans Holbein depicted Cromwell, the main character. This is the most flattering picture he could come up with. This was commissioned by people that wanted to think highly of Cromwell, and he looks evil. All right. So this is the kind of guy we're dealing with.
Yeah, he does look evil.
Yeah. I got to stop screen sharing now. Boom.
Oh, good job.
Thank you. So these books are extraordinary, and they open. The very first book opens with Cromwell having the shit kicked out of him by his father, and it traces the meteoric rise of this commoner into the inner sanctum of the king, and he helps the king get divorced. He was a big guy for reform in terms of religion. He wanted to, he was basically a serious Protestant, and he's a wicked Machiavellian sort. And by God, as this thing proceeds, it's not so much that you love him because he's an anti-hero, but you start to actually believe in the world that he is depicting, which is a world that is governed entirely by monarchy and sort of absolutism. And these books were written well before the Trump era, and it freaked me out because it is almost a exact depiction of what's going on in America right now, with people who will do anything to get into power, and then they serve their lizard master as hard as they can until they get their heads chopped off, metaphorically, which is what happened.
Do they always get their heads chopped off?
Well, in the good old days, yes. Yeah, Cromwell ended up getting beheaded because Henry VIII got tired of him. So he killed him.
What about Henry VIII? Because he doesn't sound awesome.
Well, he just died.
Okay. No head cut off, though.
No. But
I guess
Henry
we
VIII,
do all have the justice of death at some point.
Well, so the great problem of the era was the king needed to produce a male heir, and Henry VIII
he was not good at that.
Well, he he had several that died in some state of infancy or pre-born or whatever, and then he had a son who was a bastard who died, and then another son who was born in wedlock, and that one died, and the two surviving real heirs were Elizabeth, the famous Elizabeth, and then the Bloody Mary. Exciting stuff, kids.
Whoa.
But I think what's great about these books is it goes on forever, and I like that kind of thing. But also, it was a woman analyzing men's issues in a way that was just honest. Like she didn't necessarily have an axe to grind. What comes out of it is, a very important liberal truth or whatever. But it felt real. It felt like she knew what she was doing. And I think that for many of the men I know, myself included, the sort of gray inner world that she depicts for Cromwell will be very familiar. And
can you explain that a little? I mean, you don't have to, but
I have it on good authority that other people experience the world through like a range of emotions that are not just disgust, contempt, and like placid, I'm kind of okay right now. Cromwell's inner world is definitely sort of monochrome. He's so badly damaged that he can only see one way, and occasionally shafts of light break through in sort of human interactions. And it's just sort of glorious and wonderful to observe. So I commend these books to you.
Thanks, Michael. That's really interesting and awesome. Can you tell us the names of them one more time?
They are Wolf Hall, Bring Up the Bodies, and The Mirror and the Light.
Sweet.
Hilary Mantel, the great Hilary Mantel.
Hilary Mantel. And when did they come out?
Over the past 10 years or so, but the Bring Up the Bodies, or the last one, The Mirror and the Light, came out maybe 3-4 months ago.
Oh, wow. Cool. Huh. Interesting. Well, thanks.
You're welcome.
I think that's our show. I'll make a couple quick announcements, assuming I can find them. As we said, like and subscribe. That's especially important now that we're doing.
Do it.
Yeah, now that we're doing this on YouTube. In fact, go beyond that and maybe post this episode on your Facebook or whatever weird things you use to try and get us out there. Because the more people that watch, the more resources we'll have to be able to do cool shit that you want to see. With that,
people.
We have a little cover now, $10. Obviously, we can't make you pay that. And if you can't pay it, we don't want you paying it. But if you can, we hope you consider doing that. Starting next week, I believe we will be directly paying the artists ourselves with a cut where we have like a percentage situation that we'll put out.
We made an algorithm.
Yeah, totally. So consider Venmoing us, and also Venmo Christy. And thank you to both Christy and Baynard for being on. Once again, next week, we're going to have Aaron Gordon, a senior staff writer for The Motherboard, which is Vice's tech and science publication. He's also worked in a number of different journalistic areas, largely under Vice, but other places as well. And he and I are going to have a conversation about reporting on sexual assault post Me Too and how to balance believing women with journalistic integrity and how to tell those stories in a way that is realistic and respectful to the people that he's writing about. Full disclosure, he wrote about me and like 5.5 years ago and did a pretty good job. So
it's going to be an interesting conversation.
Yeah. And by pretty good job, I mean exceptional job. And we have the incredible artist Zadia, who you should all go look up, Zadia. Zadia is going to be on next week doing a live set. It's going to be incredible. So like and subscribe. Tune in next week. Hachi and Michael, do you have any closing words?
Yes, I would just like to... Excuse me, Michael, I'm speaking. Yes, I would just like to jokingly apologize to our audience. This will be the one and only time I tie coronavirus jokes into Hachi Explains the Internet. We will go back to only the truth and no only jokes the truth from now on.
Okay. Next week we should have a conspiracy section. We'll see.
The people in the YouTube chat were very right about people getting shut down for talking about conspiracies on YouTube. You can't even say the C word on YouTube. No, I think next week or whenever I get slotted back in, Abby wants to know what Unicode is. And boy,
yeah, I'm excited to hear about that.
Oh, I can hardly wait.
I have never even heard of it. So great. All right. Well, with that, thank you all so much for coming. This has been Mobtown Live. We'll see you next week.
Farewell.
Thank you. Good job, everybody. Someone asking how long the season is. I think it's cute that
they can hear you talking.
Oh, really? Right now?
Yes.
Sorry. Oh, we totally know exactly how many weeks it'll be.
Yeah, there's a plan behind all that.
They can still hear you talking. Stop.
We know exactly what we're doing.
not a stupid woman. She makes everybody else do her dirty work.
In these trying times, Pepsi is here for you.
What the fuck?